All right, let's start with this. Which of these lepers did Jesus touch? The healing of the man with a skin disease or the healing of the 10 men with a skin disease? Write your answers in the comments below. Today we'll still be looking at the similar stories by preparing ourselves to answer HOTS questions. Now, if you have answered the healing of a man with a skin disease, you are correct. Well done. Congratulations. Now, we'll be looking at these two stories today because these two stories are very similar. We would like to see what is the difference between them so that when the questions are asked about this, we will not be confused thinking that one story is from another portion. Okay, so it's chapter 5 and chapter 17. So these two stories, even though they are quite far apart in terms of chapters, the similarity between these stories is very close. So one is a shorter story, which is given 4 marks usually, and the other one 8 marks. So let's take a look. So if you look between these two, it's different in length of words, okay? But we'll take a brief look at both of these stories so that we are able to look at the differences. So the man with a skin disease is in chapter 5. We remember that it's one single person. And this person, he threw himself down and asked Jesus to make him clean. Okay, first thing you remember, he threw himself down and he asked to be made clean. Basically, he's asking Jesus to heal him. And Jesus answered by doing an action. He touched him. And then he answered, I do want to. You notice that he actually answered this question. If you want to, Jesus says, I do want to. You can make me clean. Jesus answered, be clean. And at once the disease left the man. Jesus gave an extra order at the end. He says, don't tell anyone. You need to read at the footnote or why Jesus tell him not to tell anyone, okay? And secondly, he said, go straight to the priest and let him examine you. Then, to prove to everyone that you are cured, offer the sacrifice as Moses ordered. So make sure you read the footnote for this one as well. It will be helpful in answering the HOTS question. Now let's move on. In the second question, there are some similarities. Let's look at it. So now we have 10 men, right? We have 10 men. And this is between the region of the North Galilee and the Southern Samaria. So it's in between these two regions. Therefore, there is a mixture of lepers here. Most of them are Jews. One of them is a Samaritan. So they all stood at a distance. Make sure you read at a footnote as well. It will explain to you why they have to stand at a distance. And they shouted this, Jesus, Master, take pity on us. That did not say the same thing like the first man. The first man says, if you want to. They didn't say that. The first man also said, make me clean. But here, they didn't directly ask to be healed, but they did ask for help. Okay, take pity on us. They didn't exactly say what they want. Okay, and then let's see how is Jesus' response. So Jesus saw them and said to them, here, you notice that very similar to the previous story. This is where students usually mix up between these two stories because they are so similar. So it says, go and let the priest examine you, but there's no continuation like the previous story. And then on the way, they were made clean. Of course, this one we have a continuation of the story. The story didn't end there. One of them came back, who is a Samaritan, okay, this foreigner. And that's where, when we put these stories together, you will notice that the first story is in a town. We are not sure what town it is because it didn't say. But we know that in the second story in Luke chapter 17, it is in the border between Samaria and Galilee. It's quite interesting because usually lepers would have to stand quite far away because they do not want to infect others, as well as they do not want to be affecting others in the terms of being unclean, all right? But here this man is very close by and he managed to throw himself down. He was close enough that Jesus can actually reach out and touch him. So I want you to look at it. He threw himself down and Jesus touched him. And here you see that there is a connection. Whereas in the second story, they stood at a distance, but nothing happened because they're quite far away, right? Jesus didn't touch them. In another thing of the first story, the request was, you can make me clean if you want to. So Jesus answered both. I do want to, he said, and be clean. Okay, so there is a connection. When you remember this, please remember these two connections and you are able to answer it in better detail. All right, now in the following commands, right, in the following order, the first man, Jesus tells quite a lot of things. There are 4 things in all. Don't tell anyone. And then he says, go to the priest and let him examine you. In this one, it is identical, right? Identical with the second story, which is with the 10 men. So you can write it identically. But in the first story, there are extras. It says here to prove to everyone that you are cured. Why? Because he is already clean, you see. He is already healed instantly. So as a proof that they are cured, they have to offer this sacrifice. So the idea is that if they no longer have leprosy and the priest has determined that they are healed, what happened is that they will begin to offer this sacrifice. It's in the law of Moses, in the Old Testament, in the book of Torah, okay? Another thing that you notice is that this one happens at once, while this one happened not immediately. It is when they go by faith. The 10 people went by faith. On the way, as they were walking, they were made clean. Okay, so the 2 reactions at the end is also different. This one was in Jesus' early ministry. Therefore, Jesus is proving that he is the Messiah. So the news about Jesus spread and people came to hear him, to be healed, okay? And the second story is at the latter part, okay? It's at the latter part. Jesus is now nearer to Galilee, going down south. And then the importance of the story here is the comparison between the Samaritan and the Jews, because only the Samaritan came back. Okay, so that one you have to remember. Now, this is not enough. You need to memorize both of these stories so that you can able to answer them together. So make sure you watch these videos and you memorize the stories about how this, in 2 different separate incidents, the miracle of Jesus healing the leper happened. Now, we want to go back to SPM 1995. This is a long time ago. The question went like this. Comment on why Jesus' touch went against the social or religious custom of his days. Make sure you look at the past year question because there is 2 incidents when Jesus actually touched. So if you go to the footnote of that story, it is being explained that it is because of this thing called the ritual called being unclean. If they touch something that is unclean, then the person becomes unclean until the next day. So people usually don't touch lepers because they don't want to be unclean. And in the second story, they don't touch dead body because they'll be unclean too. But in both stories, Jesus touched them and it is against the social norm, all right? You do have to explain that. So read from note I, page 21. You have the answer to this question well elaborated. Another question was quite new. It's in 2018. It says that students are to compare and contrast these 2 incidents of healing. Now that you have put it side by side, you notice that there's quite a lot of comparison to be made. First is that you notice that there is a difference. In the first story, it's quite nearby, near enough that Jesus can reach out and touch him. The other one was quite a distance away. That's the first difference. The second difference is that the first miracle happens immediately, while on the second miracle, it took some time. While they walk by faith, healing happened on the way. The similarity is in Jesus' command, asking them to go to the priest and let them examine you. And in this case, they will be able to be sure and assured of the miracle. Okay, so this is where you will be talking about similarities and differences between these 2 stories. Let's look at one story more, one question in 2004. It says, identify the different methods used by Jesus to heal on each of the above occasions. So we have looked at the difference just now. It's number 1, distance away, and number 2, immediately and a little bit of a wait. Okay, so suggest reasons for his actions. So you can look at page 21, note L, as well as page 77, note J. In note L of page 21, it will talk about why Jesus chose to touch that person. And in page 77, note J, it will talk about why Jesus wanted them to walk this walk of faith before the healings happen. Okay, so the answers will be right in your textbook. That's all for today. Thank you. Like, subscribe, and share.